All right, we're going to get started here. It is very exciting to have Jeremy Wasom here as our speaker today. So let me introduce her. Um, and I'm just filling in for Kyla McMullen and Ming Lin, who actually created this series for CREWP. Susan Roger, co-chair of CREWP. But let me introduce Jeremy. So she is an alum of University of Florida, where she got her bachelor's degree, her master's, and PhD in civil engineering. Um, and while she was there, she became very passionate about issues of equity, access, and inclusion in engineering and computing. And as a result, she developed like programs and activities that supported diverse students in these disciplines. Currently, she is the Thomas O. Hunter Rising Star Assistant Professor in the Department of Engineering Education, where she does research on broadening participation in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and computing. Um, and she's interested in understanding how mentoring impacts student trajectories and self-efficacy. Um, and then I just want to mention that in 2018, she was appointed to serve as special assistant to the UF Dean of the Graduate School in the Division of Graduate Student Affairs. And at that time, she managed the UF chapter of the Edward A. Boucher Graduate Honor Society, of which she was actually a founding member and inductee. Um, and she's very interested in understanding how mentoring impacts student trajectories. Her research is in the intersection of tech and education. And she's got several awards for like the 2017-18 National Society of Black Engineers, Mike Shin Distinguished Member of the Year Award, 24 class of University of Florida, 40 Gators under 40 and the UF Hall of Fame. So that's pretty exciting. Um, and I also want to mention she has a role in mentorship. She currently serves as the member of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine's Roundtable on Mentorship, Wellbeing, and Professional Development. And she is also a co-creator of the Modern Figures podcast, and that's very exciting. They have um, shows about where they elevate the voices of Black women in computing. So that's the Modern Figures podcast. So check that out if you haven't seen that. And let me go ahead and let Jeremy get started. So thank you for coming, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me, Susan. I'm going to try to figure out how to share my screen and not choose chaos.
Okay.
Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. I know my computer is about to flip out because I just shifted some things. Okay, great, perfect. So I was asked by my friend, Dr. Kyla McMullen, to share with you some ideas about addressing productivity and engagement challenges in mentorship. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to talk to you about that today. Um, Susan gave a great introduction to who I am, but one of the things I wanted to mention that she didn't share was that I used to be the project manager for the Institute for African American Mentoring in Computing Sciences. And so I spent um, about 2.5 years in the land of computer science, as I like to call it, as a non-computer scientist. It was really interesting to see the differences between, you know, engineers and computer scientists. And I do think that there is a difference. I always like to start sharing with who I am because I think that it's important because it informs a lot of what I do. So these are just some pictures of me and my dog babies and my family. There's two pictures of my daughter who is no longer this tiny. She is like half my size and only 5. It's really amazing. But family is really important to me. My faith is really important to me. And so I always like to let people know like I'm a whole person. I'm not just those titles on the screen. I, as an assistant professor, lead the PRISM Lab, and so that's practitioners and researchers investigating self-efficacy and mentorship. And in the Department of Engineering Education, we have a lot of really kind of freedom to look at things that we find intriguing in the education landscape. And a lot of my work is actually in computer science education. And that's because of my postdoc, which really led me down this path of wanting to know more about mentorship and how it can influence students to be successful. Because I do think that self efficacy and mentorships were ways that I navigated my graduate school experience and the only reason that I made it through the program. And so, what can effective mentorship do? So, it can improve the educational environment. I was I will call my experience traumatic. Like I really do genuinely believe that what I went through was traumatic, but because of my mentors, it felt less isolating. It can provide a space for you to help develop transferable skills. I know that you've been in workshops all summer long, so I won't necessarily harp on all of the things, but I do think this idea of improved social capital and self efficacy are really important because if we don't think that we can accomplish something, it's really hard to motivate yourself to do it. And so self efficacy is from Bandura's theory in the 80s, really. And this idea of ways that we can increase students' efficacy, self efficacy, is by providing them these mastery experiences where they actually get to do the things that they're supposed to be doing. Vicarious experiences so they can see someone. If you see it, you can be it kind of thing. The encouragement, the support like that we provide through our words, helping students with their mental health and well-being, and then like how they're feeling in general. Like we can help motivate our students if we understand ways to help impart self-efficacy to them and increase their self-efficacy. And so in general, when I do mentorship training, I'm a trained facilitator of the Center for the Improvement of Mentored Experiences in Research curriculum, both their entering mentoring curriculum and their entering research curriculum. And I think that these are great tools to leverage if you're someone who really wants to understand how to improve your mentorship strategy specifically for research. On their website, you can actually join a portal and it's free to join and have access to evidence-based strategies for mentorship. And some of the things that's covered in the curricula include aligning expectations or how to create a mentoring philosophy, um, thinking about things like cultural awareness and diversity, even right now, helping establish research self-efficacy, improving communication. All these things are covered in a lot of their work. And so I'm going to actually have us do a couple of case studies from this space and ask some of you to kind of chime in and provide your personal anecdotes about how you feel about the case studies. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first activity, which I think is really exciting. So um, the first activity is to think of yourself applying for your dream job. I'm, imagining that I could be this person in this bed asleep. My dream job would be stay at home, do nothing human. But let's think of a real job. And you are going to be mentoring students as part of this very important job. And you've been asked, how do you approach mentorship? What are some specific examples that you might share to demonstrate you understand what effective mentorship would be? If you raise your hand, they will unmute you. Oh, hi, Deborah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing good. So I think effective mentoring is a place where you do more listening than talking, where you want to allow the students to have their space and share. Uh, because as a mentor, you actually learn more from your mentees than you would know. And once you learn more about what it is that they are looking for, what it is that they want, then you can proceed with helping them come up with the solutions because you're not the one who is giving the solutions that you think are the best to fit the situation, but you've taken time to listen and allowing them to point to you so that then you can guide them to the direction that will be more appropriate for them.
That's great. So active listening and really just allowing the students to guide their direction. That strategy is called mentoring up, and there's a lot of literature about that. Thank you, Deborah. Does anyone else want to share? I see that Rua put in the chat with starting with asking students what their passions are, and I think that's great. Yes, I don't want to say your name wrong. Is it Nilufer?
Yes, Nilofer rhymes with Jennifer. Nilofer.
Oh, Nilufer, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. When I started my dream job now, more than 20 years ago, my only mentors were my advisor and my PhD committee. And my relationship with them was pretty formal, but I think they did an awesome job of pushing mentoring to me. I was very timid and I didn't think thought I would look lesser if I
Mhm.
asked for mentoring. So I was very timid about those, and they did a great job. So they are my examples of effective mentoring. And fast forward to today, there's so much literature, so much information that was gathered over the years. I think this is the start of a dream environment. It's not over yet, but it's the start of a dream environment for mentoring.
I have to agree that I think, there's been very significant strides towards providing people with some frameworks that they can use, that they can implement to improve their mentoring strategies and skill sets. So thank you, Nilofer, for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so effective mentorship can help more people get engaged in computing, right? We can have more people involved in these spaces of research that we, traditionally have not seen. It can definitely help us want to be engaged in academic communities. So I don't know that a lot of folks really consider academia as a space they can pursue as an undergraduate student. And even some graduate students are still not really super engaged in that idea of going to conferences and presenting their work. And so this can be one way to help folks be onboarded into that space. It's also one of the main reasons that people actually go to and complete their degrees. So I know that I'm in that camp. It was very, very difficult to navigate a space that I didn't feel like I belonged in. And I was actually explicitly told I didn't belong in. And so it's one of those things where it's important to consider how we can really make change, especially given that, we are really kind of slowing down in our production of folks pursuing and obtaining advanced degrees. So I had the pleasure of being a participant in several of the meetings for this consensus study that was put on by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine on the science of effective mentorship in STEM back in like 2017, 2018. And this is really what solidified for me that mentorship was scholarship and it was something that I could study, but also something that actually works when done well. And the committee came to this definition of it being a professional working alliance where the relational partners are involved in career and psychosocial support. So we want personal and professional development. It's not just about your job, right? It's not just about your science. It's about who you are, your beliefs, how you show up, and fostering growth in those both of those spaces. So yes, we want you to be great scientists. Yes, we want you to create amazing new things, but we also want you to be whole. And I think this is the first time that a lot of folks really had to reckon with their idea of my job is just to teach you these methods, right? And I would say if that was your stance, you're not a mentor. You might be a great research advisor, but you may not be a great mentor. And so I'd like to inform people that you can be someone's advisor, not their mentor, because mentorship is about the whole person. And so I have taken some of this and applied it to, as a graduate, as faculty, right? Like we're working with students, and there are some things that are expected of us that we engage students, whether they're in graduate school or they're undergraduate students, that we have ongoing conversations with them, that we demystify what it means to be in a graduate program or to be conducting scholarly research, that we're giving constructive feedback and that we are encouraging and supportive of our students, that we do build their social capital by introducing them to our networks and helping broaden who they know, that we actually care about what the student wants and not like trying to accomplish our particular goals. And I like the idea of like providing a personal touch because we're all individuals, and if we just followed the same recipe, we know that not everybody's going to come out with the right final result. Not everybody's a great chef. Not everybody's a great baker. It requires a different type of skill set to do those two things. And I think mentorship is more of cooking than it is baking. You can't just follow the recipe explicitly. You got to add your own flavor to it. So personal touch. I think in relation to the topic of this workshop, we're really talking about this like constructive feedback and support and encouraging our students because there's a lot going on, and we're increasingly bombarded by more and more information about our world, about what's going on locally. Students have way more access to the internet and other people's thoughts than historically any other time in the world's history. And so we need to be a reminder that like we can go in a different direction. And so this is something that my brain thought of at some point of like looking through different things. So the image on the screen, it's like activity, time to do an activity. But first I will research the theory on how to do it. And the little guy's looking at a book that says how to do that activity. And then some time passes and it's like multiple books on the ground. Oh no, you're not doing the activity. And I feel like this is how most of our students exist, right? They live in this land of like, we've given them a task to accomplish, and they're great students. So they're going to think about how to do it. And then they end up thinking about how to do it. And it's just this perpetual cycle of, I don't know, I'm stuck. And I think of myself being in analysis paralysis for a long period of time and not making a decision. And I feel like that's where a lot of our students are because there's just so much happening right now. And I see that James is mentioning like the current challenges in academia. Like, how do we even advocate for our students to find career paths given all of what's going on right now? And I'm dealing with that myself. So I should mention, I have two students who are graduating and another student who's also on their way out the door. And this is my first group of students, and they happen to be graduating at this particular time, this particular moment where jobs are very scarce and there's a lot of uncertainty. So how do we get them past thinking about, I don't know, maybe the existential crisis of what's going on in this moment and focus on what they can do to make progress towards their goals? So I think it starts with psychosocial support, right? We talked about career support. We've given our students a lot of the technical skills that they need. What we aren't necessarily really strong at is the other side of the coin. Like, how do we support the whole person? And so this particular slide I've adapted from my PhD students, one who's just recently defended her research, which was looking at the dimensions of self-awareness for graduate research mentors in engineering and how faculty and students engage in self-awareness. What does it mean to them? And I think each of these different areas are important. We need effective communication. I think we need to acknowledge our students' identity. We need to recognize their mental health. Like, where are they? Like, how do we support them and what they need? And then also understand that there is a power dynamic at play. So whether we want to acknowledge it or not, because of our positions, we do have what's perceived as more power. And so ultimately, there may be reasons why students don't come to us or share things with us because of our position. And I think as we talk about like psychosocial support, maybe these aren't things that come to mind. Like mental health, I've heard people say, like, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a certified psychologist or psychiatrist, I can't make any decisions. But I do think that we influence student mental health by decisions that we make as mentors. And so that may impact how productive a student is in our lab. If we have meetings twice a week, every week, and we expect them to accomplish certain tasks, but we don't help them or we don't provide them with additional support, or we're not communicating what our expectations are for each of these meetings, or we have entirely too many meetings, right? Like all of those things can impact a student's mental health. And beyond that, what's going on outside of the lab, what's going on outside of the university context can influence how people perform. I will insert a personal anecdote here. So I'm someone who deals with high functioning depression. And so for me, people see me and they assume everything is fine because I look fine. I'm performing, I'm winning things, getting accolades, submitting the papers, going to class, teaching my students, all of those things. But I can be very, very depressed, like clinically depressed. And it's very common that students who are in STEM have high functioning depression too. And so you have to be aware of like the things that your students are saying. What are they saying? What are they doing? How are they showing up? And you can't wait for them to disappear to assume something's wrong with their mental health. They could be struggling and look perfectly fine. So what are things that we can do? Let's see. So provide regular feedback. And this will help the students become aware of where they're at. So positive views on how you feel as their mentor or research advisor about their skills and ability. I have a 5-year-old and recently she came to me very concerned because she's going to kindergarten and she learned that they grade you in kindergarten and she might get a green, a yellow, or a red for her behavior. And she said, what if I get a red? Like, I'm super concerned. What happens with it? And I told her, you'll do better next time because you'll learn from that experience, right? So this is a 5-year-old. I imagine you have students in your lab who, they're submitting work and they're getting feedback and it may not be what you expect it to be. I think that's very common for us. instead of saying these things are wrong, it's these are the things that you did right, and these are the things that we need to work on. And so kind of modeling a growth mindset for your student of like, we need to work harder in this space. Here are some strategies to do that, I think is really helpful. I think it's also great to encourage your students to keep a journal of like what they're doing and how it's making them feel. If there's someone who's really having a hard time moving through things, I had a student whose background is computer science actually, um, have a hard time with a particular method. And I would give them time to go and work on it. I give them explicit instructions on how to do the method. I had other students talk to them about this method. And finally, after about a month had passed, I asked to see progress on some data analysis, and there was nothing. And I wondered what happened? How did we get here? And ultimately gave them another opportunity to come back to me with um, more data. We went through an example together, sat down, and I walked them through the method one more time. And when they came back, they'd only done one of the analyses that I asked. There were multiple different things that I asked them to analyze. And I realized it wasn't that the student wasn't capable, right? Because they were able to complete one of the analysis. It's just they didn't like it. And they were afraid to tell me that they were unhappy. And so I said, you know what? We don't have to do this anymore. Let's take a different approach. And immediately it was like this weight was lifted off of their shoulders. And so recognizing how your students are feeling, even when they can't tell you, just by how they're responding to your requests is really good. So if you can encourage the students to actually feel the feelings and let you know how they're feeling, that's also a great way. And then also like ask them why they do things that they are doing. Why did you make this choice? Why did you decide to um, not do this or do that? And that will also help them realize either they're avoiding something and why they're avoiding it, or if there's a pattern to those behaviors. Um, and then a final thought is sometimes we may be biased towards our students and have these ideas of what they're going to be able to accomplish. And so I think it's important for us to know what our biases are. And I think it's really interesting for me because Harvard has an implicit association test that you can take and see like how you're biased towards different things. So I was looking at like gender and racial backgrounds and seeing like what my biases are. And apparently I'm biased towards Black men, which I thought was hilarious. And I'm married to one, but it didn't matter. You know, my dad is a great person and didn't matter. I have this bias towards them. And I had no idea. So it was good for me to kind of recognize that as something that I could be on the lookout for when I do mentoring related things. So I would encourage your students, you know, if they are struggling with moving forward and being productive, there are some strategies that you can put in place. But I would also say, like, these things would help them. And perhaps they may have biases too that lead them to not asking the questions that they could be asking of you to help them. Okay, I have another activity, and this one is a case study. So it's called It Seems So Clear When You Explained It. So this is the prompt. I'll read it so that y'all don't have to necessarily. So you have recently explained a complicated computational technique to your mentee. As you were explaining, he nodded the entire time as if he understood every word you were saying. When you were finished with your explanation, you asked him if he had any questions. He said no. Just to make sure, you asked him if everything was clear. He said yes. 3 days later, you asked the mentee how his work using this technique was going, and he told you he hasn't started yet because he doesn't understand the technique. Does this happen to anybody? Not head nodding. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna see if I can see my notes. I cannot see my notes. So, just a few questions. What do you think? You have to show them, then watch them do it themselves. Okay. What do you think could have been done differently in this scenario? You can put it in the chat. You can say it out loud. Kanti.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
So I've I'm also an instructor at a university and I'm also a PhD student, so I can speak for both sides of this.
Great.
I feel like as a student, right, until you have a great rapport, until you have a great relationship with your mentor or your supervisor, like you had said earlier, you're not comfortable enough to discuss with them the questions you may have. And depending on many factors, you feel like, okay, what if it sounds dumb? Or what if the question I have isn't smart enough? As a student, you have those a lot. And as an instructor, right, as a mentor, as a supervisor, you're thinking on the other side, like, okay, I'm trying to explain what to do in words that I feel like I would understand. But again, until you have a relationship with your mentee, you're not quite able to establish, like, okay, this is this person's strength. This is where, they excel. And these are things where they need more guidance, where they need more information. And so I kind of think it's a very delicate balance where you're over sharing information or not sharing, but like spoon feeding them information
Yeah,
versus where they need to understand, okay, I understand 60% of this concept. I'm fairly confident that I can finish the rest of it, thinking as a mentee in that situation.
absolutely. I think all of those are excellent points. Like, if you don't have a relationship with someone, it's kind of hard to know what their needs are. And so that's definitely the thing that you probably want to start with. So let's assume you have a relationship with this person. What do you think the role of a language barrier might have on
Mm,
something like this, or a cultural barrier? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Kanti.
not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear
Okay. Um, That's such a great point you brought up because as a PhD student, my mentor and I, my supervisor and I, we're from different cultures. I'm from a different country. English is not my first language. I speak well, I am aware of that, but the cultural differences in the beginning, right? The different ways of approaching things, ways of approaching ideas, they are so fundamentally different when you come from very different cultures. So at one point, I actually, got up the courage and just laid everything out to her. I'm like, okay, I understand certain aspects of what you're trying to tell me, but I don't understand why so and so is important or why I should follow this, like you'd said, the cooking and the baking example, like why I need to do this before I need to get to this.
you.
And after she found that, or after I spoke, she was like, okay, I can see where that's a concern, and we're going to revise this until we can find a formula that works for the two of us. So it took some work from both of us to
Hmm.
establish that relationship. And now, many years down the line, I understand her better than I understand anybody else because we have reached that point of communication, of, talking and figuring out these are the words that will make the most sense to either of us. Like we understand our priorities, our preferences, our strengths. So I think that helped very much. And patience was the key thing there to figure out, to, work through all these issues until we were able to get to a common ground.
I love that. I think those are all phenomenal suggestions. I also see in the chat there's a lot of things resonating around ways to like really know that your mentee understands what you're requesting of them. And so that was actually one of my questions. How do you know your mentee understands? And some of the suggestions are doing co-working sessions or asking them to repeat back to you what you just asked them to do. To even just ask them questions in general to see if they understand. And so I think that's great. I think it's also a great strategy to have other people involved. So it's not just a one-on-one thing. Sometimes I feel like I'm not fully aware of if I said something or if I didn't say something. And so there's another person there to hold the mentee accountable and to hold myself accountable, honestly. It makes it a lot easier to ensure that we're going in the right direction. We also see in the chat, like there are folks who are afraid to ask for clarification. And I think we had a really good example of like understand coming to a shared language about things, recognizing that people are different. We're all different, and that's okay. Um, I have a question though about independence. So, what if you're really trying to foster the student's independence, and they're on the flip side, a student, you know, who you've given tests before? How do you make, I guess, a determination of whether you intervene or you just give them another chance? How long do you wait? What do you do? I guess the real question is like, how do you know someone's not getting it versus like they're just not even trying? Deborah.
Uh, I guess sometimes it is difficult for you as the mentor to really know if they are not trying because unless you have had that conversation, like Jeremy, you are experiencing with the students who's that method, you know very well they are capable because they've passed their courses, they've done the other work that is more technical. So you do know they can learn and you do know they can receive information. So it becomes quite difficult to know whether they are not doing what they're supposed to do because they don't understand it or it's because there's that language barrier. And I can tell you, language barrier is a major thing. You both are speaking English, but there are those nuances in between that come to play that can really hinder that delivery of that message, either from the student to the mentee, or I mean to the mentor, or from the mentee, or the other way around. So I think the best way, you already told us, ask the student to repeat to you, have another person there, which I don't know for most professors when you're working with your mentee, it's not really easy to always have another person
Yeah.
there. Uh, but maybe if you have a session that is a Zoom session, so it's recorded and you both can view it, I think that would help.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'm seeing this as a very interesting catch 22 because you know, how do
Mhm.
you or how don't you know? And what you thought was said might not be what was taken. But that language to me has been something I've experienced at the receiving end, or also have experienced towards a student, them not really getting it. And it's because of the language barrier, though it was English.
Mhm.
I hope you understand what I'm saying in
I
that.
do. I have a lot of collaborators who are from different backgrounds, and I've heard my colleagues share, like, even though I speak English, it's not my first language. Um, I'm I have to translate what you're saying in my head and then confirm that I understand. So if I repeat what you're saying, it's because I really want to understand. And so I think that is a good strategy to use with your students, like have them say back to you what your expectations are, and be very clear. But I also want to mention, thank you, Deborah, by the way, that there's a difference between being an expert and a novice, right? We have this expertise in training our students, and sometimes it's hard to remember what it's like to be back in the space of, like, I don't really know what I'm doing and I don't know how to do it, and like how to communicate where to start with something. And there's a good example of, like, when you see someone who's a master chef, like one of these cooking shows, and you're watching them, like Bobby Flay, cook something up on the show, like they make it seem so easy. Like it's just so simple. And then you look at the recipe and it's like, oh my goodness, how do I how do I do that next step? Or did I do that step already? Do I go to the next one? And so, sometimes it takes a lot longer to make something clear, not because of a lack of comprehension, but just because it's new. And so we have to be kind of people who are patient in that space, but be gracious to our students and let them fail and come back and try again. So yes, absolutely. Cooking chefs do all the work. Okay, we could say the same about postdocs. Okay, there's one more comment. A challenge I've seen these days is some people forget what is said or lose train of thought. Yes. So putting it down on paper, sending follow-up emails, those are great strategies. So the next case study we're going to do is Ready Mentee. And I think this is kind of the opposite side of the coin. So as an experienced undergraduate researcher was constantly seeking input from his mentor on minor details regarding his project. Though he had regular meetings scheduled with his mentor, he would bombard her with several emails daily or seek her out anytime she's around. Even if, oh, there we go. Even if, where am I? Even if it meant interrupting her work or a meeting that was in progress. It was often the case that he was revisiting topics that had already been discussed. This was becoming increasingly frustrating for the mentor since she knew the student was capable of independent work, having demonstrated this during times she was less available. The mentor vented her frustrations to at least one other lab member and wondered what to do. So, how do you determine that a student is ready to be independent? How do you know how much independence you can give to your mentee? That is a good observation. In the chat, it says the student seems insecure or not confident that they know what they know or that they have authority to make certain decisions. So to me, that sounds like their expectations aren't aligned. And so the mentor didn't do a great job at communicating that. It's a great observation, Rua. Mm. They're independent when they come back with more than you asked for. Hmm, I could go with that. I could see that being one way to measure that. Do you think that it's important for mentees to make mistakes to become independent? Or can you give them too much independence? I've had students come back with more than I asked for, but it wasn't relevant to what I asked them to do. So I'm wondering, how do we kind of put some rails up around that?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm hesitant to keep coming up here,
It's okay.
but it's so quiet, so I'll pop in. Uh, I think it comes a time where it gets a little frustrating, like this mentor was, and you can tell the students, yes, they have the following criteria to follow, and this is where you believe they should be within. And if they go way beyond that and they bring you what you believe has gone out in a tangent and it's not pertinent to what it is that the research is supposed to be on, I think it's a growing pain to let them know this is wrong. Because guess what? If you don't bring it back, you will continue to have this kind of issue. Just let them know, uh, yes, you don't have to step to me every minute when we have discussed that these are the steps you can follow. These are the steps that you need to be doing. If you feel that at one point you're going a little bit more, don't come and interrupt or stop me. Just send me an email and share, and let's have that conversation. But at the same time, you have to let them have that autonomy of growing, because they are going to step out there and become their own people, their own researchers who are also going to guide other people. So uh, you have to lay that ground, but if they don't follow it, then you have to come to that truth understanding that you've stepped away too far, and what you believe was supposed to be happening didn't happen, right?
Mhm.
And let's have this conversation and know how to avoid this next time, so you're not putting so much effort on work that cannot go forward. So you have that conversation, and I think it would be a good learning process for the mentee, because we've all been there. I mean, some people have done better work than some of us. Some of us have been there where you did so much work that nobody cared for, you know? It
Mhm.
happens, yeah.
Absolutely. I think, you have to consider things like people's personalities, forgetfulness. Like they may have come to you and asked something and they just forgot, and we didn't write it down. So they didn't have a point of reference, and your door was open. So I just stopped by to check in and ask a question. There's fear of making mistakes, right? We could also go back to cultural differences, or maybe even we're saying they have experience, but there could be other reasons, like other experiences that may have led them to want to check in. Um, Samantha said, I've noticed some students feel rejected when I turn them away, even when their interruptions are too much. And so uh, they have a announcement period in the lab about their open closed door policy, and how to send emails or write down questions when the door is shut. Um, and I think that that's a good strategy, right? So we have to set boundaries as the mentors. And oftentimes we don't say those things out loud. So we don't tell the student, if you walk by my office, but I'm on the phone. Don't just come and sit down, or don't hover outside of my office waiting for me because I might be going to another meeting. Set up a time if you need to talk with me. So having those explicit expectations of like how you'll communicate with each other would be really helpful. Um, I definitely think that it's hard to like make an assumption about this particular case. Like we don't know who this person is or like what's going on in their life or what their background is, but all of those things could play a role into why they want to be there constantly asking all the questions. Like maybe they're just lonely and it's not even about the work, it's just they want someone to talk to. There could be so many reasons why the student pursues things in this way. Okay, so think about yourself. How do you best give and receive feedback? Oh, I love this strategy. So someone said, Arpita said in the chat, encourage asking peers and more senior folks in the lab and distribute the mentoring. So it's not always you. And um, Nilifer said using good communication skills is important and use I statements about what you expect and what you desire. Yes, all of that. So when you give or receive feedback, what do you expect it to be? I know this will be probably all over the place because we are not all the same. Oh, I don't know. Deborah's not raising her hand, but she's up here.
I'm still there, but let other people give some input.
Yay. Hi, Kathy.
So for me, as a student or as a mentee, the best way that I have received feedback was very clearly. So if I had sent over a Word document or a PDF document explaining or showcasing my work, the best way that I've gotten feedback was written in the Word document or, in the PDF document. The mentor had made notes saying, you know what, this statement could have been rewritten in such a better way. Instead of using words like ABC, you make it more powerful by using words like, XYZ or something to that effect. I know it's such a time-taking process, but it was really helpful. At that point in time, it was really helpful. I mean, now we have ChatGPT, we have, Grammarly AI powered, and they are able to frame your sentences. They're able to say, use this word for much better impact. But this was 6, 7 years ago. We didn't have ChatGPT. And it was really helpful for me. And as a mentor, what I have found is that system is really, really helpful. Everybody prefers that. So when I tell my students, even in a classroom setting, I tell my students, okay, what I expect from you is writing down in clear formats. I don't want a page-long paragraph. I want it broken down into 3 paragraphs, and I'll give them limits. I'll say each paragraph can have 5 full sentences, and that's it. And when I say full, I explain to them what I mean by full. Like, no in itself generally is a statement, is a sentence, but not in academic writing. So you
Mm-hmm.
expand on that. No, because so and so, or just 5 full sentences per paragraph. I like bullet points. And I mention that very clearly to them when I'm setting expectations at the beginning of that class or of that assignment. And most students, including my own graduate assistant, have preferred that kind of communication up front, because it cuts down on the amount of time they spend thinking, okay, it's okay for me to write like a page and a half paragraph. That's really not, because it takes a lot of time to go back and forth. So setting up very clear communication up front reduces the amount of feedback or common feedback that you give to, let's say, a classroom with 30 students. It cuts down and they understand what you expect of them and what they need to be doing at the minimum.
Totally agree with that. I know undergraduate students are a lot when you're teaching them. So
Yeah.
having very explicit expectations for them is great. I see that James prefers active listening and like having someone repeat or repeating back to someone what he feels they just said. And for me, I would prefer to have a conversation with someone than get something in an email. I know some people want text messages. They don't want emails. They might want something in Slack really quick. Um, I'm a phone call person. I know I'm a millennial and that's against what we do, but that's the type of person I am because I'm an extrovert. But I know, like, when I was a student, um, this was different, right? The things that I needed as a student um, was highly variable from that. And I think with my research advisor, it was really tough because obviously I'm not going to get a phone call and have this long conversation. And often it was difficult to even have an in-person meeting. And so I had to adapt how I could receive feedback. And so I did regular emails like, after our meeting, this is what I thought I heard. These are the things that I think you expect. And then I would have an agenda every time that I would come into the meeting. So I would be prepared in that way. And so you might want to think from the perspective of being the mentee, what is it that they might need to feel heard, to feel like they are accomplishing what they set out to do in your lab? And so the biggest thing is I think we can help them create um, systems for being accountable and to foster this culture of accountability. So first is to ask the student themselves, how do they want to be held accountable? Or even if they do want to be held accountable. That may be a good place to like decide whether or not this is someone who is a great mentee for you or not. They don't want to be held accountable. It's going to be really hard to make progress unless they are a self-starter and already very independent and you've seen their evidence of their ability to do work. You can come up with different strategies for accountability, and I have some that are written under the orange heading of like regular meetings, having them set an agenda, goals that are time bound and have incremental steps that they can accomplish in between, have them submit reports to you. Some labs that people do presentations, on a regular basis of like, this is my slide and this is what I've done so far. Uh, Providing constructive feedback, and then, once you reach that goal, actually celebrate that win. Because often I think we don't celebrate the little mini successes that we have in our groups. And that's really, really important. Okay. And then just some general strategies to try. So individual development plans, if you haven't heard of those, they're important. Ways to like think about different categories of like success for students, the ways that you can measure things. Mentoring compacts are really cool because those are agreements and you can set those expectations ahead of time. Mentor maps are a great way to distribute that mentorship support. Um, and then you can come up with an accountability plan, maybe using some of the strategies on the prior slide. I want to kind of leave you with this picture. So this is a Hubble Space Telescope image. It's of the constellation Hydra, and like we are just a part of a constellation of our students' network. right? We're just one little piece. And so in this big giant universe of their lives. And so it's important to recognize that though we have influence on their lives, there's so many other things that do. And we want to be a positive force on their life and help them go the direction they want to go in. So hopefully you heard that, this really starts with you and knowing what effective mentorship means to you, being aware of yourself and how you feel and what your biases are and the things that you're bringing into the relationship will really helping your students develop self-efficacy and self-awareness and really build this growth mindset towards the work that they're doing. It's really important. Be transparent, provide feedback, maintain student confidentiality, and then just create an environment where they can flourish and learn and grow and celebrate your wins. All right. On that note, thank you. I will hang out if you have any questions. And I appreciate you allowing me to chat with you a little bit about mentorship. Thank you for coming.
Please answer the poll before you hop off.
Yes, please do the poll.
We've also sent an email from SERP for the final feedback survey. Just if you didn't attend a certain session, I think it shouldn't ask you about that one, but that's the final step in receiving your registration feedback, is making sure you complete that final feedback survey.
Shall we stop recording?
That was great.
Thank you, Susan.